and I'm male to female transgender. This video is very somber. Most of my videos are. I'm trying to become more upbeat, but when you're dealing with transgender issues, gender dysphoria, and depression, it doesn't really make for upbeat topics. And I'm doing this video, and I don't want to overstep my boundaries or impose on personal representation of writings. If you have been viewing the news recently, you would be aware of a tragic suicide of a transgender teenager. Her name was Leelah Alcorn. I've been trying to be proactive in trying to have her tragedy memorialized through Facebook by sending out links from a link that I received asking to sign a petition to ban reversion therapy for transgender identified youth. From what I understand, Leelah Alcorn and her family were at odds with each other, and poor Leelah struggled. She was very bright, very autistic. Her writing was amazing. Sadly, I only got to learn of her through the tragedy, and I feel it's very, very sad to see such youth and promise taken away in such a horrible and tragic way. Nobody really understands what life is like for someone who's transgender. They don't know because they never stepped in their shoes. And I know personally because I struggle with it myself. And I've been dealing with my own personal struggle from the age of 3. And I'm in my early 50s. And I just started my own transition. Leelah was 17, and she had to deal with her family not accepting of her transgender identity, and she was desperate for love and attention. Transgender youth are wonderful children who need to be nurtured and loved and embraced for who they are. They should not be cast aside and treated as if they're abnormal. Leelah didn't have to die, but sadly she had no one to turn to. And the therapy that her family sought was to try to convince her not to live, to be true to herself. And I just find that people are very ignorant. And the sadness is that the ones that you would think would accept you and love you the most typically are the ones that cast you aside. And that seems to be the case with Leelah and her family. And Leelah was very smart in how she wrote and expressed her feelings. And I don't want to get into trouble, but I want to kind of memorialize Leelah in my own way and share what she wrote. And I cried when I read it, but I'm gonna read it, and it's her suicide note that she posted to her Tumblr page that has circulated in all facets of media. I actually posted the link to my Facebook page and my Pinterest page, and it's posted on news videos on YouTube as well, so the public has access to it, so I don't believe it will be a problem. But I read it in respect to Leelah Alcorn. Suicide Note, she titles it. And it's sad. If you are reading this, it means that I have committed suicide and obviously failed to delete this post from my queue. This is in Leelah Alcorn's words. Please don't be sad. It's for the better. The life I would have lived isn't worth living in because I'm transgender. I could go into detail explaining why I feel that way, but this note is probably going to be lengthy enough as it is. To put it simply, I feel like a girl trapped in a boy's body, and I felt that way ever since I was 4. I never knew there was a word for that feeling, nor was it possible for a boy to become a girl, so I never told anyone, and I just continued to do traditionally boyish things to try to fit in. This is in Leelah Alcorn's words. When I was 14, I learned what transgender meant and cried of happiness. After 10 years of confusion, I finally understood who I was. I immediately told my mom, and she reacted extremely negatively, telling me that it was a phase, that I would never truly be a girl, that God doesn't make mistakes, that I am wrong. If you're reading this, parents, please don't tell this to your kids. Even if you are Christian or are against transgender people, don't ever say that to someone, especially your kid. That won't do anything but make them hate themselves. That's exactly what it did to me. Leelah states, my mom started taking me to a therapist, but would only take me to Christian therapists who were all very biased. So I never actually got the therapy I needed to cure me of my depression. I only got more Christians telling me that I was selfish and wrong and that I should look to God for help. When I was 16, I realized that my parents would never come around and that I would have to wait until I was 18 to start any sort of transitioning treatment, which absolutely broke my heart. The longer you wait, the harder it is to transition. I felt hopeless that I was just going to look like a man in drag for the rest of my life. On my 16th birthday, when I didn't receive consent from my parents to start transitioning, I cried myself to sleep. She states, I formed a sort of fuck you attitude towards my parents and came out as gay at school, thinking that maybe if I eased into coming out as a trans, it would be less of a shock. Although the reactions from my friends was positive, my parents were pissed. They felt like I was attacking their image and that I was an embarrassment to them. They wanted me to be their perfect little straight Christian boy, and that's obviously not what I wanted. So they took me out of public school, took away my laptop and phone, and forbid me of getting on any sort of social media, completely isolating me from my friends. This was probably the part of my life when I was the most depressed, and I'm surprised I didn't kill myself. I was completely alone for 5 months. No friends, no support, no love, just my parents' disappointment and the cruelty of loneliness. At the end of the school year, my parents finally came around and gave me my phone and let me back on social media. I was excited. I finally had my friends back. They were extremely excited to see me and talk to me, but only at first. Eventually they realized they didn't actually give a shit about me, and I felt even lonelier than I did before. The only friends I thought I had only liked me because they saw me 5 times a week. This is in Leelah Alcorn's words. After a summer of having almost no friends, plus the weight of having to think about college, save money for moving out, keep my grades up, go to church each week, and feel like the shit because everyone there is against everything I live for, I have decided I've had enough. I'm never going to transition successfully, even when I move out. I'm never going to be happy with the way I look or sound. I'm never going to have enough friends to satisfy me. I'm never going to have enough love to satisfy me. I'm never going to find a man who loves me. I'm never going to be happy. Either I live the rest of my life as a lonely man who wishes he were a woman, or I live my life as a lonely woman who hates herself. There's no winning. There's no way out. I'm sad enough already. I don't need my life to get any worse. People say it gets better, but that isn't true in my case. It gets worse. Each day I get worse. This is in Leelah Alcorn's words. That's the gist of it. That's why I feel like killing myself. Sorry if that's not a good enough reason for you. It's good enough for me. As for my will, I want 100% of the things that I legally own to be sold, and the money, plus my money in the bank, to be given to trans civil rights movements and support groups. I don't give a shit which one. The only way I will rest in peace is if one day transgender people aren't treated the way I was. They're treated like humans and valid feelings and human rights. Gender needs to be taught about in schools. The earlier the better. My death needs to mean something. My death needs to be counted in the number of transgender people who commit suicide this year. I want someone to look at that number and say that's fucked up and fix it. Fix society, please. Goodbye, Leelah, Josh, Alcorn. Very tragic. When I read this, I was very sad, and I cried, and I felt like I was reading my own story, but my youth was similar. I didn't come out. I was very afraid Um, the tragic situation in Leelah's case was she thought that her family would embrace her and accept her as transgender girl, but that sadly wasn't the case. And unfortunately, Leelah felt no options that could help her. So tragically, she crossed the highway and was struck and killed by a tractor-trailer truck. What a tragedy. I don't understand why people are so unaccepting of people, of even young children who identify differently in their gender. Maybe I'm biased because I'm personally also transgender, but it's impossible for every child born to be happy as the sex they're born into. It just doesn't make sense. You know, it's not perfect. Not every boy who's born a boy relates as a boy. It may be a very small fractional percentage, but there's a possibility that there is a boy born who identifies as a girl. That is called gender dysphoria. Gender dysphoria simply states that the mind does not conform to the body. And transgender is a legitimate medical condition. Gender identity disorder, gender dysphoria, transgender, transsexual. This has been in medical journals written about, theorized, hypothesized. There are many famous people who were born transgender. And I believe if you read in the journals that it could be something that you're born with. And you can't you can't deny someone their true essence as a person. You have to embrace them, especially if they're your own child. Leelah was a special person, and I wish that I was able to contact her in my own way, or someone was able to reach her to avoid such a tragedy. The sad reality, though, is that there are a lot of transgender suicides, and the transgender teenage group is mostly affected. The range of suicides amongst transgender people cross the gamut, but there is a high percentage of teenage suicides because their families and friends abandon them and they have no place to go. Leelah was accomplished. She was an artist. Her job where she worked accepted her, but her parents didn't. And it just doesn't make any sense. I don't know how the family is dealing with the tragedy. I'm sure they're heartbroken. I'm sure if they had the chance to do it all over again, they would gladly embrace her. But it's too late now. She's gone, and she'll never be again. And I only hope that her death, her tragedy, sends a ripple effect to all who are affected in some way by transgender, to sit back, take a step back, and try to understand that people who identify as transgender should be accepted for who they are, embraced, and loved just as much as any other child or person. They are no different. They can do anything in their life. There are many accomplished individuals who are transgender. Doctors, anybody of all occupations. The leading pioneer surgeon in gender reassignment surgery, Dr. Marcy Bowers, is transgender, and she is a trans woman living, and she's had the surgery and everything, and she devotes her practice as a gynecologist, but a big segment of her practice is aimed towards helping transgender identified individuals. I just pray that these tragedies don't happen, and that people start to realize that bigotry and what's the word I'm thinking of? When somebody doesn't accept you, I can't think of it, but we should all tolerate people no matter what their differences are. We all have a right to be true to who we identify as. You know, I think also there are a lot of transgender individuals who are afraid to even live life the way they feel and identify, because they have a lot to lose in the process. So there are many transgender individuals, I would suppose, that don't even transition. They just live a quiet life of resolution, and they somehow find the strength to live. However, their life is not the way they hoped or wished it would be. And all I can say is that we have to stop with the prejudice. That's the word I was thinking of before. Prejudice is not tolerated. We have to preach acceptance, no matter what your differences are. You should be who you are. You should be loved, and you should be treated with dignity and respect. And I dedicate this video to the memory of Leelah Alcorn, a young transgender girl who didn't deserve to die. She should have had the chance to live her life the way she felt as a girl, but sadly, her family did not accept her as she identified, and she unfortunately became another statistic of transgender youth who commit suicide. I say a prayer for Leelah. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Dear God, please pray for Leelah and look over her. She is up in heaven now with you, and accept her as Leelah, a girl with a heart of gold who is very special and is an angel, and nurture her, love her, and respect her for the girl that she is. Poor Leelah Alcorn, she didn't deserve to die. May she live in eternal peace. I love you, Leelah Alcorn, and I pray for you, and I'm very sad for your loss. May you rest in peace, dear sister. Love, Emily.